again, everybody. I'm back with my map of Narnia. You know, if you're somebody like me, I love maps, and even when I'm driving or when we're taking a trip, I like to know where we're going and where we've been and how far it is. And so right now we're in the part of the story where the White Witch is got Edmund with her, and they're chasing after the children. And so this is where a lot of the story first started, where the lantern is, and Mr. Tumnus's house, and then where the beavers are, and it keeps moving this direction. There's the White Witch's castle, her house where all the statues are, and then they are chasing after them because they're trying to get over here, the children, to meet Aslan, over here. So they have a long way to go, and the witch is starting to chase them, but things are starting to change. So as the children chase this way, run this way, the White Witch and her sleigh are chasing after them this way. So the rest of the story will mostly take place right over here. There's a battle, and there's the stone table, and there's Aslan's camp and the witch's camp. So that's where we are right now. Okay, we're on day number 18, so let's go ahead and start reading the story. Now they were steadily racing on again. And soon, Edmund noticed that the snow which splashed against them as they rushed through it was much wetter than it had been all last night. At the same time, he noticed that he was feeling much less cold. It was also becoming foggy. In fact, every minute it grew foggier and warmer, and the sledge was not running nearly as well as it had been running up till now. At first he thought this was because the reindeer were tired, but soon he saw that couldn't be the real reason. The sledge jerked and skidded and kept on jolting as if it had struck against stones. And however the dwarf whipped the poor reindeer, the sledge went slower and slower. There also seemed to be a curious noise all round them, but the noise of their driving and jolting and the dwarf shouting at the reindeer prevented Edmund from hearing what it was, until suddenly the sledge stuck so fast that it wouldn't go on at all. When that happened, there was a moment's silence, and in that silence Edmund could at last listen to the other noise properly. A strange, sweet, rustling, chattering noise, and yet not so strange, for he'd heard it before, if only he could remember where. Then all at once he did remember. It was the noise of running water. All round them, though out of sight, there were streams, chattering, murmuring, bubbling, splashing, and even in the distance, roaring. And his heart gave a great leap, though he hardly knew why, when he realized that the frost was over. And much nearer, there was a drip, drip, drip from the branches of all the trees. And then, as he looked at one tree, he saw a great load of snow slide off it, and for the first time since he had entered Narnia, he saw the dark green of a fir tree. But he hadn't time to listen or watch any longer, for the witch said, "Don't sit staring, fool. Get out and help." And of course, Edmund had to obey. He stepped out into the snow, but it was really only slush by now, and began helping the dwarf to get the sledge out of the muddy hole it had got into. They got it out in the end, and by being very cruel to the reindeer, the dwarf managed to get it on the move again, and they drove a little further. And now the snow was really melting in earnest, and patches of green grass were beginning to appear in every direction. Unless you have looked at a world of snow as long as Edmund had been looking at it, you will hardly be able to imagine what a relief those green patches were after the endless white. Then the sledge stopped again. "It's no good, your majesty," said the dwarf. "We can't sledge in this thaw." "Then we must walk," said the witch. "We shall never overtake them walking," growled the dwarf, "and not with the start they've got." "Are you my counselor or my slave?" said the witch. "Do as you're told. Tie the hands of the human creature behind it, and keep hold of the end of the rope, and take your whip, and cut the harness of the reindeer. They'll find their own way home." Well, the dwarf obeyed, and in a few minutes Edmund found himself forced to walk as fast as he could with his hands tied behind him. He kept on slipping in the slush and mud and wet grass, and every time he slipped, The dwarf gave a curse and sometimes a flick with the whip. The witch walked behind the dwarf and kept on saying, "Faster, faster!" Every moment the patches of green grew bigger and the patches of snow grew smaller. Every moment more and more of the trees shook off their robes of snow. Soon, wherever you looked, instead of white shapes, you saw the dark green of firs or the black prickly branches of bare oaks and beeches and elms. Then the mist turned from white to gold and presently cleared away altogether. Shafts of delicious sunlight struck down onto the forest floor, and overhead you could see a blue sky between the treetops. Soon there were more wonderful things happening. Coming suddenly round a corner into a glade of silver birch trees, Edmund saw the ground covered in all directions with little yellow flowers, celandines. The noise of water grew louder. Presently they actually crossed a stream. Beyond it they found snowdrops growing. "Mind your own business," said the dwarf when he saw that Edmund had turned his head to look at them, and he gave the rope a vicious jerk. But of course this didn't prevent Edmund from seeing. Only 5 minutes later he noticed a dozen crocuses growing round the foot of an old tree, gold and purple and white. Then came a sound even more delicious than the sound of the water. Close behind the path they were following, a bird suddenly chirped from the branch of a tree. It was answered by the chuckle of another bird a little further off. And then, as if that had been a signal, there was chattering and chirruping in every direction, and then a moment of full song, and within 5 minutes the whole wood was ringing with birds' music. And wherever Edmund's eyes turned, he saw birds alighting on branches, or sailing overhead, or chasing one another, or having their little quarrels, or tidying up their feathers with their beaks. "Faster, faster," said the witch. Well, there was no trace of the fog now. The sky became bluer and bluer, and now there were white clouds hurrying across it from time to time. In the wide glades there were primroses. A light breeze sprang up, which scattered drops of moisture from the swaying branches and carried cool, delicious scents against the faces of the travelers. The trees began to come fully alive. The larches and birches were covered with green, the laburnums with gold. Soon the beech trees had put forth their delicate, transparent leaves. As the travelers walked under them, the light also became green. A bee buzzed across their path. "This is no thaw," said the dwarf, suddenly stopping. "This is spring. What are we to do? Your winter has been destroyed, I tell you. This is Aslan's doing." "If either of you mentions that name again," said the witch, "he shall be instantly killed." Oh my. Well, that's the end of our 18th day. And I hope you'll join us again tomorrow, because now things really have changed. They're changing from winter to spring. So I hope you have a good night, and God bless you, and we'll see you tomorrow. Thanks.